I bid you all good morning, good evening, and good night, wherever you may be watching this transmission. It is I, Mike Martins. Guys, I've been getting a lot of questions, a lot of people asking, Mike, is housing bottoming out? Mike, is housing gonna go down? Mike, is housing gonna fix? When can I buy a house for my family? I got people email me. Mike, I've been waiting on the sidelines for a long time. Luckily, I didn't buy because a lot of people are in trouble to sell, or a lot of people can't sell, or a lot of people are in hot water, or a lot of people are now with this whole COVIE thing floating around. Mike, what do I do? So a lot of housing questions I've been receiving the last week and a half. A lot. So I want to put something together for you guys. So to understand what's going on, right? The problem is we're not playing with typical business 101 rules here. We are competing against government laws and measures and stuff that's put into place to keep propping a housing market, right? So let's go over here real quick, really quick. So what happened was in Canada, and not just Canada, Canada's not just on the hook for this. Australia, the UK, and New Zealand, and Western United States of the United States of America, from Seattle all the way down to the Tijuana, San Diego border. What happened was Canada, was so heavily dependent on other important resources. Canada was a great country. Back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, or mid-90s, Canada was more about production. Canada was more about growing a solid GDP. Canada was about balancing its books. When Brian Mulroney was our prime minister, he went out of his way and added another tax called the GST, government sales tax, to pay down our deficit, so Canada has no more deficit, so Canada could be debt-free. And unfortunately, everything kind of went off the treadmill a whiles back ago, almost, let's say, second half of, so 1994, 95, when Canada stopped immigration from Europe, everything just came to a halt when it came to fabricating and making and creating. You guys understand. Now, what happened is that's a year or two after that, then you got the whole NAFTA coming in, right? And then we moved whatever production we had to Mexico at the time. So Canada really wants to go green, but they still want an economy. So what did they start doing? After 2006, 7, and 8, Canada found a new way, and that was competing for rich immigrants, right? At first it wasn't that big, but then after 2012, 2013, the whole rich immigrant money coming into the country was just so off the hook. We're talking about billions of dollars laundered through Canada. We're talking about people bringing money onto the shores of Canada that just completely made any local Canadian crime family look like Beavis and Butthead. Like, you know what I'm saying, right? So let's go over this and discuss what happened. So this is what happened. So we understood this. We've been talking about this on the show. This is from 2016, this article. Canada wants more Chinese worker students and tourists. Now, the students, they want big time. Students are a big business in the Commonwealth. In Ireland, right now, Ireland is big, bringing in Chinese students because a lot of them bring in a lot of money, and they charge them 4 to 6 times the tuition that you would a local from the country. So, wow, locals are getting a deal. No, it's still very expensive. Ever since student loans became ever since the governments deregulated the whole student loan thing and made it their own way, and then kind of took off with it and kind of stole it in the way, and then basically you see tuition going from here all the way here within a couple of years. Why? Because back in the day, the average person would work the summer, pay off their student loans, have a car, and still manage to get by and still pay for their college. But now it's changed. Now you have to take out these huge loans, and you get approved for it on the spot. You get the money transferred to your account, and then you got to pay it back with these crazy interest rates. And yeah, so what happened was, towards the end of the 2006, 7, 8 era, the locals started running dry on cash, right? They were tapped out, and a lot of people in 2007, 2008 started going towards foreclosure and bankruptcy. Not because they didn't have work, not because, no, it was because they were just over leveraged. A lot of people were severely over leveraged. Now, what happened was, this strange phenomena started happening around 2010 during the Vancouver Olympics. Canada started competing and bringing in wealthy money. We started selling all Grouse Mountain. We sold all our big buildings, like those big skyscrapers, those big banks, and the you know, those big office buildings that you lease out space to people for business and stuff in the downtown core. Most of that is all owned by Chinese corporate numbers and stuff from China. And so people started scratching their heads and wondering what the heck is going on. The price of housing just started to blow up around 2010. So what happened was, so now it's not just Canada that's on the hook for this. Other countries were competing for wealthy investors. Okay? There's a lot of countries that wanted to immigrate to Canada from Europe. I know from the Europe side more. Like, I have family in Portugal, and they try to come to Canada because they have other family here. So, like, just to kind of bridge the family, they were like, you can't come here. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you can't come here. But you see, Canada builds relations with different countries in different levels, right? So Canada wants to bring in Chinese workers, students, and tourists. So there's a lack of work already in Canada. There's a lack of we already have tourism, but now they're basically basing it off the wealthy. They want to bring in, so Canada right now, visas have been increasing from China to about 500,000 per year, but opening more visa offices could help Canada compete for more Chinese workers, students, and lucrative tourist business. It's the biggest market we have, and they spend a lot of money, he said, on average $750 US per day. Now, you're probably wondering, what the heck does this have to do with prices going down, Mike? Let me explain to you what's going to happen in the markets. There's two things that could happen. There's two sides, okay? Now, so Vancouver has been transformed by Chinese immigrants. It goes into this. This is just an article from June 5th, 2019. It goes, when you cross over the Granville Street Bridge, the winds in downtown Vancouver, you'd be forgiven for thinking you're in Hong Kong. The skyline has the same ribbon of the gleaming apartment towers hugging the waterfront and a similar mountains in the distance. There is also an unabashed display of wealth, readily apparent in the city of Kitsilano neighborhood. A McLaren showroom, blah, blah, blah. Vancouver's, all these beautiful skylines, all these beautiful cars. And saying that... it's a magnet for immigrants, blah, blah, blah. And it's showing here how predominant it is. This is from 2015, so this is old, right? So Vancouver was 20% Chinese at the time, but this is old. I think it's over 50% right now, if not more, if not way more. Why? Because I'll tell you guys what happened. Goes into this. Aboriginals and whites leaving Vancouver. So what happened was, people on average wage workers, not minimum wage, average wage workers are leaving. So Aboriginals and whites leaving Metro Vancouver. So that's in huge numbers. People are leaving. I'm one of those statistics. I was living in downtown Vancouver, right at Stadium, and it got to a point where the cost of living was just so expensive, and it wasn't even worth it. When I lived in Miami Beach, if I want to rent a place, I could rent a place for next to nothing. I could do really well, get a job, and not have a problem, an issue. Here, you're kind of being forced out of your own city. So I noticed that pattern where a lot of people were leaving. A lot of people were leaving into the interior, right? And then you have this problem where average hourly wages in Canada have barely budged in 40 years. This is not lying, right? So the problem is, we're competing for wealthy investors, but the problem with that, there's an offset to that. The locals can't keep up with it. They can't keep up with all the foreign money, right? So that becomes a huge issue, right? The average wage Canadians are paid per hour has hardly changed since the 1970s, even as an increasing number of people become increasingly educated, according to recent StatsCan data. In 2016, the average hourly wage paid a full-time employee $227.70. Data released, so this is average hourly wage. The analysis of historical data, Statistics Canada, meanwhile, found that the minimum wage and the average hourly wage have remained more than less unchanged since 1970s. So here it is. Full-time job. So management, $40 an hour. So you're probably thinking, Mike, $40 an hour, that's great. You're probably taking home 28 after tax, maybe 25 after tax. Natural and applied scientist, $33 an hour. So these are average wages. And average wages among these people cannot afford. So here's the highest paying jobs. Okay? So highest paying jobs. Physicians, $86 an hour. Dentists, $72 an hour. Petroleum engineers, $62. Engineer managers, $58. University professor or lecturers, $58 an hour. Now here's the deal. A lot of this stuff is shift work. A lot of it is temporary, and that's great. But the problem is, a lot of these people that I know that are in these fields can't afford to live in Vancouver either. Okay, so let's move on. So average wages have not moved, barely budged in 40 years. Now let's go back here. Now here's the deal. Here's the 2010 Vancouver host of the Olympic Winter Games. 2010, right here. Okay, guys, on this graph. Ooh, let me get this a bit bigger for you guys here. Let me get that. See if you guys could see that. So, oh man, you could barely see that. Let me stretch the screen out for you guys here. Give me a second. I just want to be able for you guys to be able to really see this graph, so you can kind of understand where I'm going to go with this. Let me put my display picture here. Let me just bring this up here. Let me see if I can find it. Give me 1 sec, guys. Here. All right, I can't find which one it is. Video media source. Okay, so I'll just full screen this here real quick for you guys to see, because this is actually extremely important. So here are the 2010 Vancouver Olympic Games right here. I still remember this like it was yesterday. Everybody was talking about, hey, the market's going to crash right here after the Olympics. It's been going up for so long. It's been going up pretty much since late 90s, early 2000s. We barely saw any movement in 08 and 09. We saw a little dip, and it just rebounded right back, not even a year after 2008. So we were on basically on high streaks here. We're going high. Now here's this is the problem now. Let me tell you what the problem is here. It hasn't gone down. It's plateaued here, and it's slightly gone down. So a detached home is 1.6 mil, and then the attached type of townhomes, whatever, 893,000, and apartments, one bedroom starting at 666,000. So here it is. I remember this as just like it was yesterday. The market was going to crash after the Olympics, and we thought it was going to go back down to realistic 1990s levels, because I'll tell you why. Because wages weren't going up and people weren't making more money. But in and around this time, you saw a huge influx of people moving in from China. Like, I mean, huge. And it's never stopped. So the money kept coming in. But the problem is the average Canadian proper here in these years had to get first-time home buyers loans, have to get a loan from mom and pops, had to get a loan from a friend, or had to get these secondary mortgages at weird percentage rates, and really putting themselves out there when it came to financing because of FOMO, and a lot of people felt they were missing out. Okay, so you guys see where I'm going with this. So let's continue with what I got here, my presentation here for you guys. So let's close this. So you saw how that happened, okay? So now what happened? Well, this is what happened. Canada would be in a recession without money laundering. So the amount of billions of dollars laundered from overseas, and this is from 2011 to 2015, $200 billion. And that represents 2.13% of the GDP. That is huge. This is enormous. Why? Because Canada wanted to be green. Canada wanted to become less industrialized and more into the future, the information age, which was a good vision back in the late 90s. But then when they stopped all this stuff and stopped manufacturing and shipped all our jobs from Mexico to China, then things started getting kind of hectic in a way. Because we were kept poor by buying cheap junk from Walmart and cheap junk from everywhere else. So here it is by province, how many billions of dollars were laundered through each province, right? Quebec, Ontario, and Alberta is a big one for money laundering. So there it is. That's 2015. We can't get numbers. They say from 2016 January to 2020 is like they're saying it's about $244 billion. Yeah. So it got so bad that they put a foreign buyer's tax. I don't know if you guys remember that. When they put the foreign buyer's tax in Vancouver. It was 3.5, almost 4 years ago. They put the foreign buyer's tax. What happened was a bunch of investors went down to Seattle across the border and skyrocketed the price. And then that's when the housing prices took off in Toronto, where everybody from Vancouver ran to Toronto and bought up that market, and that market blew up right through the roof after 2017, right? You guys remember that, and it was all foreign money. And then you had a lot of real estate brokers, right? Real estate brokers and brokers for the banks and stuff, and they're all trying to tell people, oh, if you don't buy now, you'll never get to own. Now, we got COVIE at the door. Oh, one more article here real quick. World economy would collapse if City of London stopped laundering money, says whistleblower. This is a big deal. They're laundering a lot of foreign money. So this is a huge deal. Now, what is Canada going to do? Canada obviously is still going to keep this open and keep more and more people coming in. Basically, if you have money, come in. If you're a student, come in. Come in. I don't think Canada's looking for stragglers. They want people with lots of cash to come in, right? And show the rest of the world how wealthy and powerful Canada is. But okay, so now let's talk here. Let's talk. So this is my two angles I'm seeing with the housing markets. With the housing market, I'll give you an example. I'll give you the example of Canada, right? And I see this happening in any other Commonwealth country. There's two angles. One, we have a grassroots economy. We actually start, we rebuild an economy from scratch after this COVIE thing blows through and wrecks the markets and brings housing down. Now, with people not employed and people not working, it's going to be tough for them to go in and say, well, now I can afford to buy a house, especially if a lot of people got laid off and they're on EI. It's going to be really tough for people waiting on the sidelines unless they saved up a lot of cake to put down, right? But here's the deal. A good grassroots economy from the people, driven on wages, average wages. So when the average wage earner could buy an average wage home with the wages they're earning at average, then we got ourselves a grassroots economy. Economy that's built by the people, by people's wages, not money coming into the country, being dumped into the country and destroying our economy. It completely destroyed the economy for the locals. The locals can't keep up, so they do these first-time home buyer loans. They make these Mickey Mouse, interest-only mortgages, like in Australia, where you just pay the interest on the VIG, on the interest you're paying. So interest-only mortgages, weird amortizations, all kinds of bizarre stuff going on the books just to get locals in the housing market because they can't. Our housing markets in the complete Commonwealth was struggling because they weren't getting first-time home buyers, local first-time home buyers in the markets because they just can't get in. They can't compete with these overinflated prices. So a grassroots economy that's tied to wages and production. That's how you build a healthy and strong and stable housing market, right? That's how it works. That's how it's always been driven by wages. When layoffs start happening, guess what follows? The housing market crashes. Now, no wages don't even go up. Never mind layoffs. Who cares about layoffs? No one needs to get laid off anymore because there's so much foreign money coming in that the locals that try to get in these markets, it's like, we don't need you anymore. That's what's been happening in this country. We don't need you guys anymore. So that's a problem. Now, who's going to service the infrastructure? Well, they haven't let Europeans in, I don't know how many years now, almost 20 years. They haven't let Europeans into Canada. If anything, they've been deporting like 40,000 Portuguese in 2006, 7, and 8. Look it up. They've deported tons of Portuguese that own their homes here and have kids here that are Canadian citizens that have been living and going to school here in Canada and pay their taxes, and they all got booted out the door. So what's happening here? So let me tell you what's happening. So a grassroots economy will work that will tie wages to housing and stop competing for wealthy investors. A lot of wealthy investors, like the story that was told to me by my friend Jacob, he told me on our show that he was in a casino in Macau and he met another gentleman there, a Chinese gentleman. And we're talking, and he's like, and the gentleman asked him, "Where are you from?" He's like, "Oh, I'm from Canada." He's like, "Oh, the guy says, I own 220 condos in Canada." To Jake, "I own 220 condos in Canada. They're all empty." My friend goes, "Wow. If you're ever in Canada, let me know. We could go visit." He's like, "Oh, I've never been to Canada in my life." But he owns 220 condos in Canada. This is an issue. This is the problem here. We sold out to the highest bidder. We sold all our big towers. We sold out even private land that we've had, all kinds, to build more condos and build it up and make. It's all about money now. It's not about family, and it's not about laying roots in communities and building a strong communities. It's not about that anymore. So now, what is going to happen? So my vision would be a grassroots economy based off of what wages are. So the average house, like this house here, should go for like $375, easy. And if you say, "Oh, Mike, that house costs $600,000 to build," yeah, because of all the bureaucracy and red tape. That house in Arizona, I could find a house like that for under $200,000. In outside of Dallas, $170,000. So I don't think the house costs $600,000 to build. Yeah. So now let's get realistic here. Let's call a spade a spade. This is what I think is going to happen. COVIE is going to blow through and do its rounds. What you're going to have happen is we're going to have a weak dollar, a weak economy, and we're going to have home prices go down. But I think what Canada is going to do is they're going to ramp up and promote Canada even harder to get more wealthy people and kind of play the card where, look, China lied to you. Look what happened with this China. China is unstable. You want to get out of China. You want to come to Canada. It's safer. Or you want to come to Australia. It's safer. I think Canada will go on a huge marketing run to get in more wealthy Chinese workers, students, and tourists. Because this is what has been driving our economy for the last 11, 12 years. And because the locals in these cities and stuff, they're completely tapped out. They could no longer add any. And the younger people that are coming out ready to get a job, but they got 80 grand in student loans. So they got the mortgage, but no house. So that's how bad it's gotten. They federalized student loans, they deregulated and then federalized student loans, and then that put a lot of students into huge poverty debt. Because back in the day, you wouldn't have to pay that much because school tuition went up less than 1% every 2-3 years, and you could reuse the books. Now they've made it into a system, a complete business. It's a complete business. Now that the locals can't no longer get into the housing market, the schooling and all that stuff, because they're starting to realize, oh, I get a degree. I'm probably going to be working at McDonald's with my degree. Hey, I don't blame them for that because that's what's been happening. Now, I believe the markets are going to go down. We're going to have a weak dollar, and that's going to be attractive for foreign investing. And we're just going to keep pushing this narrative where we want more wealthy immigrants and pushing that narrative after COVIE makes its rounds. And we're going to see this spike up again. And the locals that live in this country, good luck. That's all I have to say. So those are my two angles. A grassroots, the government steps in and says, okay, we screwed up on this big time. Huge time. So we're going to have to start a grassroots economy. We need to tie housing to what wages are. And then this way, the average wage earner, doesn't have to commute 2 hours to come into work. The average wage earner could live comfortably still in Canada, could live in like back in the 80s and up into the mid 90s, where you were an average wage earner. You could live still a comfortable life. All you had to do was get a job. Now you could have 2 jobs and your spouse could have 2 jobs and you're still not making ends meet. And why? Because we sold out. When you combine lucrative big money and you combine transformation and then you combine mass movements within the provinces of people unable to afford to live in the places they were born and raised in, and then with wages not moving for 40 years, and with housing just keep going up nonstop, and with billions of dollars, Canada would be in a recession without criminals, basically, without money laundering, and the world economy would collapse if it stopped laundering money. So this is it, guys. Those are my 2 angles. Grassroots, let's do this right. Let's give the people what they worked for. This is not fair. The average Canadian shouldn't be in poverty because they shouldn't be house broke for buying a house and shouldn't have to wait 1,000,000 years to pay off a house with the way these banks are fees and all this crap and 30-year amortizations. No, they shouldn't do that. It should be criminal. Or they wait for the markets to go down, then foreigners see an attractive weak Canadian dollar, weak housing market, and then Canada promotes the crap out of it to bring in more people to buy up the entire country. Or what's left of the country. Those are two angles I see. So people waiting on the sidelines, make sure you can have some sort of employment letters that you have a job when you get back. So if the markets start to decline and start to see, just like the stock markets are, and things start declining and things starting to correct towards wages, then maybe, just maybe, at the right timing, you might be able to get in. Hopefully, you don't get in and it still keeps going down. That's the problem. Guys, that's just what I think. It's happened in Seattle. So Seattle's been completely bought out. Seattle is the new Vancouver when it comes to Chinese housing. So here it is. This is from the Urbanized. Seattle is the new Vancouver when it comes to Chinese housing investment. See, this is in 2019. So intensive government intervention creating unfavorable housing market conditions for foreign investment in Metro Vancouver have prompted a surge in mainland Chinese investors to go down south to Seattle. So they put the foreign buyers tax here, and then everyone went to Seattle. And they keep blaming it. Oh, it's the tech companies. No, it's not. It's not the tech companies. I can tell you that. It's not the tech companies. I know some tech workers that live 5 of them in one bedroom apartment because they could barely afford to live. So this is true. It's what's going to happen, guys. And Toronto blew up once Vancouver put the foreign buyers tax. Toronto just blew up in 2017. Holy smokes. So, yeah. You guys comment below. Let me know what you guys think of what's going on here. Do the Canadian proper stand a chance? Does the Australian proper stand a chance with this whole COVIE thing going around, maybe cleaning house? Maybe it's going to reset the markets. I look forward to reading your comments down below. Let me know. Mike Martins here, signing off.